In my opinion, audio is the most important component of video production. From weddings to corporate, narrative to YouTube, music videos obviously. People can forgive bad video, but bad audio can ruin a watching experience very quickly. Thankfully, these days, filmmakers have access to a plethora of tools that can help make the process of capturing great audio even easier. With both inexpensive, great sounding microphones and recorders, there should be no excuse for not being able to hear what's been said clearly. On that note, the Zoom F2 is an inexpensive set and forget recorder, which makes the process of capturing audio basically foolproof. Let's take a look and see if it's worth the price. To give you the quick rundown, the Zoom F2 is a $300 single track recorder that comes included with a Lavalier microphone. With this clip on the back, it was designed to be attached to a belt or a pocket and capture dialogue of people speaking, whether using it for corporate, YouTube, or weddings. However, I actually prefer to use the 3.5mm input to capture audio coming off PA systems or DJ decks, which has been very useful in some of my work. The good thing is that 3.5mm microphone input also has a 2.5 volts plug-in power for lavalier microphones. It also has a headphone jack and a USB-C port, which can be used to offload files or adjust the settings, as we'll get to later. It accepts micro SD cards up to 512 gigabytes, which compared to video will most likely allow you to record audio for the rest of your waking life. And finally, there are two models. The BT version of this includes the ability to start and stop recording remotely via an app, but in today's video, we're only going to focus on the non-BT version, which is the one I chose, for both price reasons and not really needing this feature. The Zoom F2 isn't the first audio recorder of its kind. The Tascam DR10L has been a favorite among wedding filmmakers for years, with its compact size and ability to easily capture audio from a lapel microphone. And while the F2 is basically in the same vein as the DR10L, it has one big key selling point: 32-bit float audio. Now, you've probably heard this explanation so many times at this point, so I'll keep it short and save the technical detail, but if you already know this stuff, please use the chapter markers below to skip to the next section. Trust me, I won't be offended. Effectively, the dynamic range of capturing in 32-bit float means that audio recording levels become irrelevant, because no matter how loud the sound source gets or how quiet it is, you can be sure the audio will not peak, and that if it's recorded too low, you can increase the volume later without introducing noise. Now, this is massive for me. As someone who's worked in weddings, recording in standard 24-bit means you always run the risk of getting the levels wrong. As a real-world example, at a previous job, we arrived at the reception while the DJ set had already started. So I had no way to judge what the handheld microphone level would be at. And as it turns out, it wouldn't be very high at all, and the audio I recorded that evening was really quiet. So in post, I had to increase the gain, but doing so also raised the noise floor and introduced a lot of hiss. This resulted in me having to use a denoiser, which took more time, and meant that the audio didn't sound as good as if I'd been able to get the levels right in the first place. The Zoom F2 would have basically eliminated this issue because this recorder has no input controls at all. Just turn it on, make sure the input light illuminates to tell you that audio is coming in, you can adjust the output volume if you want to monitor it first, and then hit record, making sure to flip the switch to hold to ensure it doesn't accidentally get stopped if someone touches it. Once you're done recording, you can play back your most recent file to check it was captured correctly, and that's about all this device can do. In post, if the audio is too quiet, you can boost it, and if it's too loud, you can reduce it, never having to worry about what input level you had your device set to in the first place. And in my testing, plus using it on a real-world shoot, it works exactly as advertised. Future map. Having gone through some stuff, having realized my mistakes, I wanted to quickly interject this video to number one, test this lavalier microphone in the worst acoustic environment, tiles, hard surfaces, put it through its paces. How does this sound? Unprocessed, just the levels hopefully, as long as it isn't absolutely terrible, in which case I will scrap this take. But effectively, what I wanted to say is when I made this video, I was being highly idealistic in the sense that I had done all my testing. I had proven that 32-bit float audio worked as it was intended. You can't clip the actual audio. You can always bring it back in terms of reducing the levels or increasing the levels. I took it to weddings. I filmed things with it, recorded things with it, didn't film things with it. It's not a camera. And it's one of those obvious things that I kind of missed that I wanted to make sure I kind of let everyone know about. When you are using the Zoom F2 or any 32-bit float audio recorder, in the way that you are plugging it in at the end of the signal chain, you are at the mercy of whatever goes through that signal chain. And effectively, you are picking up the scraps of everything that has been processed. One thing I didn't think about when doing these weddings is the celebrant isn't an audio engineer. The celebrant doesn't care as long as the guests can actually hear what they're saying. They're gonna crank that speaker up as much as possible. They're gonna have the gain settings on their mic totally wrong. That audio was already clipped before it came into my recorder. And it doesn't matter that the Zoom F2 has effectively unlimited dynamic range because I was just capturing clipped audio. So that's probably one thing I wanted to mention is even if you do everything right and you want to use this recorder in an environment like weddings, sometimes shit happens. The other great thing about 32-bit float audio is file sizes aren't much bigger than 24-bit. Unlike going from 4K to 8K in the video world, which would be measured in tens of gigabytes difference, 1 hour of 32-bit float audio is only about 180 megabytes more than the 24-bit variant. That means if my math is correct, you should be able to achieve something like 740 hours of 32-bit recording on a 512 gigabyte micro SD card, just in case you need to record that 12-day music festival. Before we go on, I do want to mention that while 32-bit float is a really cool new technology, it also has its time and place. Speaking with some sound recordists recently, they're not as hyped as us one-person band filmmakers. And that's fair because it's literally a soundie's job to mix audio on set and to ensure they get the levels right. In their line of work, the only time 32-bit float might come in handy is if they're recording up close to some really loud sound sources. And even in my work outside of weddings, 24-bit has been fine because I can easily check and set the levels beforehand for corporate shoots or these YouTube videos, for example. Having said that, the F2 has been an amazing addition for some of my work, but it's not perfect. And I want to start off with one big downside first: build quality. This thing is super lightweight, which is achieved by using a cheap plastic. There are plenty of reviews which will tell you this battery door is a ticking time bomb given how thin it is. My advice is if you do buy this product is to always pull down from the middle and don't use too much force. Even the micro SD card cover at the back is a little finicky to close at times, and again, you never want to be too rough just in case it breaks off. The sturdiest thing on this device is actually the metal clip at the back, but it's also way too stiff. I reckon if you do manage to attach this to your belt or pants, you could probably go skydiving with it and never worry about it falling off. And while you may wonder why that's a negative, a stiff metal clip partnered with a cheap and thin plastic isn't a recipe for long-term reliability, especially when you may need to be handing this over to talent and asking them to attach it themselves. I can see this battery door going pretty quickly as they unknowingly put pressure on it. So I really feel for $300, the main thing you're paying for is that 32-bit float audio. But how about that included lavalier microphone? I want to recognize it's nice Zoom includes any kind of microphone at all with this recorder. I can see they're trying to make this a total package, but in my opinion, it also feels and sounds fairly cheap. Again, at this price range with the recorder, I wasn't expecting much more. Compared to my Rode lavalier, which is no gold standard by any means, the capsule is much larger, the cable is thicker, and the connector is massive for whatever reason. The sound to my ears felt thin and lacked low end, and even though the Rode wasn't leaps and bounds ahead, it was definitely easier to add some EQ and compressor to help improve it later on. Thankfully, the lavalier and the Zoom F2 does include a locking mechanism to ensure the cable can't just be yanked out mid-recording, but in my testing there was also a lot of static noise if the connector was even slightly rattled. My advice here is don't buy this recorder for the lavalier unless a cheap solution is all you're looking for. The good thing is the Zoom F2 does send 2.5 volts of power from that 3.5mm input, so it can accept higher-end lavalier microphones if you have one lying around. So while there aren't many options on the recorder itself, it does have a lightweight app on Mac and PC, which allows you to adjust some more settings. It doesn't have much, but it does allow you to add an 80Hz low-cut filter, adjust the output volume, which you could also do on the device, and choose between 44.1 kHz or 48 kHz recording modes, both of which are still in 32-bit float. To be honest, I looked at these settings and realized I probably won't need to use this app going forward because the recorder is already good to go for 95% of my use cases. Zoom also claims the recorder has 15 hours of battery life on 2 AAA batteries, and while I haven't managed to run it down at the time of this recording, using it for 6 hours continuously at a wedding It held up no issue. Just make sure to use high quality batteries, because I can tell you from buying cheap AAAs from Kmart all those years ago, not all batteries are built equally. These literally feel like they're mostly air and will most likely last you 10 minutes. So what are my final thoughts on this little audio recorder? Besides the cheap build quality, which honestly is a big factor to consider if you work in weddings, for example, and the included lavalier, which is less than ideal in both appearance and sound fidelity, this is the least expensive 32-bit float audio recorder you can buy, and it does the job. As I mentioned, I mainly plug it into PA systems and DJ decks at weddings, hit record, and come back hours later to stop it, having full faith it'll be there on the other side. Having said that, if build quality is what you prefer over 32-bit float, the Tascam is still a solid option. Both recorders also come in white, which is also really handy if you'd like to attach it to a bridal dress too. My recommendation is if you need a simple plug-and-go recorder to either attach to people or to use with other sources which don't require phantom power, this is a great little device that should hopefully see you through until that battery door snaps in two. Better not jinx myself there, actually. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.